Knox County, Knoxville, Tennessee, what's happening in the real estate market? What can we expect for 2024? What can we tell from 2023 as we head into the new year? In this video, we are going to take a look back at major stats related to Knox County. And we're only talking Knox County, Tennessee. If you want another county, I will do that. I cover a lot of Knoxville, also Seymour, Blount County, Sevier County. Those are kind of the main places where I live and land. I literally live in Seymour, which is Knox, Blount, and Sevier altogether, which is why I focus on those areas. This video is specifically about Knox County. And also, this is not a 2024, what can we think about in the market? This is looking back at 2023. How was Knox County Real Estate? How did it behave? And then how could that inform what may happen in 2024, depending on what happens with rates? Because the other thing I'm highlighting in this video is how did Knox County Real Estate, the sales, the transactions, how was it impacted by what was happening with mortgage rates? Because I don't know if you haven't heard, but mortgage rates, for the most part in 2023, were increasing. So we're going to look at some critical data and dates. Specifically, there was a rate drop like in April, as an example. The height of the mortgage rates for 2023 was in October. So we're going to kind of look at what happened in April, what happened in October. How did the Knox County market perform as it compares to national data, like national averages, versus what was happening specifically in Knox County? So the other thing about Knox County includes Knoxville, and it is a total of 35 zip codes. So that includes Farragut, that includes Powell. I'm naming those because some of their addresses say Farragut, like Farragut is its own incorporated place, but it lands within Knox County. So therefore, I just want to say that we're talking specifically about Knox County as a whole. So that being said, if you're still here, because that was the longest introduction literally ever of all time, let's get started. All right, so as I mentioned, as we're talking, we are going to consider what was happening with mortgage rates during 2023. So this graphic is from Freddie Mac, FreddieMac.com. If you can go right now and put Freddie Mac private mortgage blah 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 PMMS, and you can go and play with this graph yourself. Literally, I set it so that it was January 1, 2023 to December 31st, 2023, so we could see the whole year as a picture. Green is 15-year fixed rate mortgage. Blue is 30-year fixed rate mortgage. The other thing I want you, and you see that down here, the other thing I want you to notice, this down here at the bottom. So what that is showing, this is actually, if you go to the website, it's a sliding scale. So I can slide this scale down and this changes the graphs that I see. So what it's showing me is we're literally at the very end at 2023 of this data that they've been keeping record of. The record of their mortgage rates, what's happening goes back to the 70s. So that being said, I just wanted to make note of, in context, not only, I just wanted you to know what that graphic is, because you're going to be looking at like, what is that? Okay. So when I look at this, what do I see? What do you see actually when you look at this? The overall trend is up. If that's what you see, great. That's also what I see. I do see that there's some dips. This was February 2nd. There was a dip in April. But we can see that overall, the trend of mortgage rates is up. We can also see that we were having a decrease in mortgage rates from 2000 down. And then we see 2020, we had a 2020. After that, we bottom out and we're starting to go back upwards historically. Okay, so just some things that I want you to think about as we are going through this data. The other thing I want you to notice is if you look at the peak for mortgage rates for 2023, we see that happened in October the 26th. It was like a scary Halloween gift, if you will. Okay. The gift that no one knew they wanted. It's like those little, those candies that are like in the orange wrappers and the black wrappers. And I think they're like peanut butter flavored. They probably don't even hand them out anymore. I'm just saying that's like the worst candy you could have received. That and Smarties. Like, who wants a Smartie? If you like Smarties, let me know. Anyways, okay. to remember, overall increase in rates. The other thing to remember is October 26th. Let's think about October. As we're looking at these graphs for Knox County, I want us to remember that. All right. That being said, let's dive into some Knox County data and talk about it. What we are seeing here is a number of homes with price reductions. The orange line that you're going to see on all of these data charts is the national average. You can also see the national numbers to the right and Knox County data to the left. I'm assuming it's not flipped. If it is flipped, you can read. Okay, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just saying, you know what I mean. Okay, so local market, how does it compare to national data? And also, October 26th was a rate hike. Let's check this out. For the most part, when I look at this, it appears to me that Knox County price reductions did not follow what was happening nationally until we get into the latter part of the year. What was happening nationally that impacted everyone, aka relocating didn't matter, for everyone, rates increased. They were at their peak in October, which is also when Knox County peaked when it comes to price reductions. We are seeing, and we're going to follow what happened with sales and with days on market, but overall what we're seeing is that there was not as many price reductions from spring. Then we hit July, rates up. We hit August, rates up. We hit September, rates are up. Like if we go back and look at that rate data, we're seeing June, July. I mean, this is like a pretty, I know it's between 5 and 7%, but from the slope of this, like this is less of an aggressive slope than if we go from June up to October. That's a faster rate of change, right? So that being said, we also see, okay, a little bit of, some price reductions, blah, blah, blah. But then we see steep, like this June to July jump, boom. That's a much bigger slope, a much bigger rate of change. June to July, up, right? And then we see a little dip here going into August, whatever. So there's a little bit of lag in the data in terms of like what was happening and then what happened with sales. But I just want to show you, for example, national price reductions, for the most part, were at a higher rate than what was happening in the Knoxville area. We also see that there was somewhat of a bottoming out or just a flat line for price reductions in the spring, whereas in Knoxville, we saw more downward action and then we start creeping back up. We also noticed that in October, it seems as if there was either a lag in where people were listing their houses, like listing too high, because I'm going to show you something about prices in a second. But also we see that there were more price reductions October, November, and December in the Knox County area than the rate at which we saw them nationally. Interesting. Okay, next up, we have total listing count. So this is the total number of homes for sale, including active and pending listings per month. Again, the orange line, that is national data. I should change these colors so that Knox County is orange. You know what I'm saying? Too little, too late. You try and then you fail and you just keep moving forward. Okay, total listing count. We see that this mirrors what was happening with price reductions, which makes sense because it's kind of this like mirror data point where total listings, if there's less listings to buy, prices are going to go up, price reductions are going to be less. This mirrors what was happening in that price reductions slide a minute ago, because in October, that's when we saw, more price reductions than what was happening nationally. And this is what we see. We have a little more listings than what was happening nationally as well. We also notice, interestingly, total listing count. We see that in October, rates hiked, right? Then in November, we see more listings. So this is not necessarily that more people were putting their homes on the market. More people putting their homes on the market, probably yes, but also stuff wasn't selling as quickly, right? So we see the overall listing count for pending and active is up, and we also saw that price reductions were up as well in these months. All right, next up, pending listings. So how do we compare nationally? Nationally, when I look at this data, look at the yellow dots, the orange dots versus the bar charts, what I notice is this is mirroring pretty closely what was happening nationally when it comes to pending listings. Therefore, we are seeing that buyers are still active. as compared to like the national buyer action. What's happening in Knox County is what's happening also nationally. Buyers are buying really at a similar rate to what is happening nationally. We do see again what happens in October. We have more pending listings. We've got more pending listings and more pending listings, which is kind of interesting given the fact that if I go back and look at price reductions, you would think that it looks like there's more, like Knox County has higher pending listings here. So you would think, well, why are there price reductions? But those price reductions could be driving pending listings. So that's something kind of interesting to think about. Whereas like nationally, there was less price reductions, but there's also less pending listings. Interesting, right? Okay, let's see what's happening next. New listing count. Number of homes for sale added to the market during the month. So orange line national, red bars Knox County. Again, when I look at this, I feel like overall we are pretty much mirroring what was happening nationally. I also find it interesting. Let's look at June. So we noted that there was a slight dip in rates in June. We noted there was a slight dip in rates in April, also in February. And so this is an interesting thing because in October, we saw that rate hike, right? So it's just interesting to think of this in the context of what's happening with mortgage rates. These people, like in February, it's like this lag month behind. So February rate drop, March, more people list. April rate drop, May, more people list. It's kind of interesting, right? But then we see September, what's happening here? September, then October, new listings. And I think what this is, from my experience in working with sellers, is people are trying to beat the holiday, like get listed and sold before going into the holidays. So we're kind of thinking like, oh, this is our last chance before the new year, which is also interesting because if we look at what happened in December, major drop off in listings, less than nationally. Also, interestingly, in October and September, we have a higher rate of homes being listed for sale than what was happening nationally. Although we are pretty much following this average, I would say that Knoxville is slightly lower overall comparatively when we look at national new listings. So the main thing to think about here is what's happening with seller activity and how it's related to what's happening nationally as well as mortgage rates. And honestly, this is a little bit, I think this idea about February we saw a rate drop, March people list, right? So it's this interesting thing to think about how people are listing, how sellers are acting in relation to rate drops. All right, home size, median square feet. This is one I just kept because why not? It's interesting to think about what's happening with square footage. You can see that nationally, I think this is interesting. What's being sold in Knox County is smaller than the national average, which I think is weird because in my mind, we've got more land and property and availability of like overall home size, but it looks like nationally people have bigger houses all across the board. So very interesting. I do think it's curious. These are all within, this is a 3 square foot difference. Okay. It's not really like these are that fascinating and shifting. I do think it's weird. You could probably get down to the granular level and think, okay, well, maybe the larger houses are being sold in the summer months because those people have kids and they're moving, but actually that's not even true. So anyways, a little random median square footage. All right. Now this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Median listing price per square foot. List price per square foot for available homes in this market. This is not the sold price. This is not what they sold for. This is the price. So if I list my home and it's 100 square feet and I list it for $100,000, it's $100 per square foot. What if I sell it for $95,000? It is not $100 per square foot. So I just want to point out to you that these numbers are a little bit inflated because this is not actually what they sold for. This is where people are listing. Now, orange, national, red, Knox County. Let's check it out. We see that almost across the board, Knox County price per square foot is cheaper than the national average. Almost, except when we look at the springtime, which is also when we had the least price reductions. It's also when we had the least Homes available. Let's just go check, make sure I'm not delusional. So new listing count, we saw April, there was a dip, not the least new listing count. But then if we look at pending listings, April, there is a hike. Well, what happened to price per square foot listed? Also a hike, interestingly. Then if we look at total listing count, we saw a little bit of increase March to April. And then if we see number of homes with price reductions, that was the least. And also that's when they were listed the highest. Interesting, right? We also know that in April, what happened? We see March a hike, and then we see decreases, right, in mortgage rates. So kind of all lining up to this idea of being in alignment between availability of homes and what was happening with the mortgage rates. We see prices increasing as people are listing. So just something kind of interesting to think about. I also think this is kind of weird that we were right with the national average in December, even though our new listings bottomed out. But we also saw a lot of price reductions, more than the national average from October, November, and into December. So our price per square foot is interesting. The other thing I want to note to you is there was a lot of talk about prices going down, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Look, let's see this. What happened nationally versus what's happening in Knox County? We see price increase January to April. We see some listing price drops May. And then we kind of, in my mind, this is like a bottoming out towards the end of the year of prices per square foot. It is not as if we saw a massive drop in price per square foot over the course of 2023, despite the fact that rates were increasing. So we see that, yeah, they're not really going up. We did see that in the springtime, but overall, what we see to me is this kind of like a flatlining from May through the end of the year. Pretty interesting, huh? All right, next up, months of inventory. So this is saying basically, if there were no more homes listed on the market today, how many months would this take? How many looks to the center of a tutu pop? Which I did a Peloton workout today, by the way, and they had a song in there. It was like hip hop. Oh, it was yesterday, hip hop run with two of the instructors, Adrian and Jess King, and they played a hip hop song. I was like, how many looks, which is an extremely inappropriate song, but it reminded me of that when I thought about the Tootsie Roll pop. Anyways, months of inventory. How many months would it take to sell everything currently if nothing else was listed right now today? So orange, national, and local market is Knox County. What do you see? Our inventory, Knox County inventory, how many homes are available for sale is consistently below what is happening nationally. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because we have so many people being like, everything's going to explode and the market's going to crash and blah, 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 whatever. No, here's the thing. We are still in a seller's market in the Knox County area. We are under 2 months of inventory consistently. We saw October, November, December. In December, new listings bottomed out, but we saw in October and November, we had not only more than average price reductions, but we also had more new listings than what was happening nationally. And we still were below national average in inventory. So this slide right here is a super great indicator for what's happening when it comes to pricing. Like, are we going to see prices just top out and bottom out and people are going to lose their what from what they purchased? Now, if someone bought too high, yes. If they try to sell right now today, something they bought 4 months ago, way too high, how's it going to go? Not great. But I want to point out to you that this idea about our inventory and it being low and it being a true seller's market is indicating that, yes, the real estate market here in the Knox County area is thriving in the sense that people are still buying, people are not listing as much, and then we do still have buyer action. So just want to point out this discrepancy between the local market versus the national market when it comes to inventory. All right, I feel like I got a little bit preachy there. So I just want to acknowledge that, say that's not my intention. I hope this information is helpful. Okay, median listing price. Again, I don't think you can't see this on your end, but when I raise my hand, Zoom automatically puts that reaction up and I don't know how to take it down. It's just up there. Anyways, okay, can I take it down? I don't think you can even see these reactions, but there's literally a hand raised right here. And on my view, there is a hand up. I'm like, I don't have a question for myself. but I appreciate your politeness. And also it's funny because all the years that I had students call out and I would act like I couldn't hear them until they raise their hand. And now this freaking thing just raises its hand. I don't want it up there. All right. Anyways, median list price. List price for available homes in this market. This is not sold prices again. What do you notice? Orange, national. Red, Knox County. What do you notice? What do you see? Couple observations. Number one is these are almost mirror images. So when the national average was lower, the Knox County market was higher. When the national average was higher, the Knox County market was lower. So I think that's one kind of thing, an interesting observation. I'm also looking at March and I'm looking at October. In October, remember that's when we had the highest rate hike for the year. And then we saw a drop, right? And then if I go back to March, let's just quickly go back and look at March. What happened? In March, we saw, just before March, we saw a high and then we saw a drop. So that's interesting. So let's go back and look at this again. In March, right before March, we saw a rate hike. In October, we see a rate hike. At that point, what happened nationally with prices? Well, we see this prices increasing nationally. June, what people would say like a traditional real estate market year, where from spring going into early fall, you have your most listing activity. So this kind of mirrors that idea that, which technically it should be flipped, right? Because if you have more things on market, your prices are going to go down. If we compare what's happening, like let's look at this graph nationally. Nationally, we see prices increasing through June, and then we see prices decreasing. Well, let's look at overall inventory nationally. We saw prices increasing. We saw prices decreasing, right? And then let's look again. If we look at this median square footage, I should have deleted that graph. Who cares? I mean, there is really no true gold in that. Anyways, so here we saw prices increasing and we see prices decreasing. So it kind of is following the same pattern across multiple data lines. And then if we look at the local market, we see that, I guess these mirror each other in the sense that we have a bottom line, a flat line, and then we have median listing prices coming down. Now, I do want to point out in Knox County that, again, we're looking at a 35 zip code area. If we pull data from certain zip codes, this is not going to look the same. For example, West Knox does not look like this. There's certain areas that specifically this idea of prices dropping in Knox County doesn't necessarily apply. So how many months of price drops, median listing prices did we really see droppage? We saw it dropping from March through May. We saw a drop June to July, August to September, and then September we saw up, and then November we see dropping. So we kind of saw a little bit of this when it came to median list price overall. So interesting. All right, active listing count, number of homes actively for sale per month, excluding pending listings. So this is everything active available for sale, not under contract. What was happening? Orange line, national, red line, Knox County. What do you notice? What I see when I look at active listings nationally, I see that nationally overall, we have an overall increase listing count going up throughout the year. In Knox County, I see this kind of slight up to down activity. I also notice in October, again, listing up. November, we are higher than the national average. And in December, we're higher than the national average. Even though like when it came to December, we were lower in new listings. Okay. So it's kind of an interesting idea. And then if we kind of look at these active listings, so we're noticing this downward action and then an overall upward trend starting from June. So if I look at prices, median prices, this somewhat mirrors that idea of this like overall down to up action. There are some little like wild card months when it comes to median list price overall. So active listing count still overall, for the most part, for 2023 sits below the national average. All right, here is our last slide, our last little data piece. So median days on market, this number of days a home for sale spent on the market. So this was from list to close. So this includes when you list it, when it went under contract, until you close, someone else gets the keys. I get a lot of questions about what does it mean for the house to close? That means that is when it changes over to someone else's possession. Someone else is now on the deed. It is their responsibility to pay the taxes. Close means the keys change. Someone else can open the door. All right, so national orange, red Knox County. What do you notice? What I see is that despite some differences in pricing, despite some differences in what's happening with new and active listings, despite some differences in like overall market inventory, what we're seeing is that Knox County is pretty on par with what's happening nationally for days on market, which I think is interesting because we saw for the most part, Knox County has less inventory pretty much for the whole year of 2023, right? We had almost less inventory almost every month in 2023. However, we were still selling and closing at the same rate. And in some months in January, like even slower than what was happening in the national average. And actually, some of this is a little bit of a lag compared to what was happening nationally. People wanted to move in July quick. So anyways, just thinking on, we're seeing that overall list to close is pretty much on par with what's happening nationally. So even though, yes, we have some difference in prices, we have some differences in seller activity, we have some differences in overall inventory, the amount of time that it is taking for homes to actually sell, close, is about on par with national averages. So a couple things of note. Inventory is still sitting below national average. That inventory, I just make that point because that's why we're seeing this difference in like pricing, what's happening. We're also noticing that there is a little bit of what I think that we're seeing here is some seller like uncertainty on where to price things because like these are all over the place. Whereas we just saw an upward and a downward when it came to what was happening nationally. And a lot of that is likely related to what's happening with overall inventory, but what's also happening with overall, like the market, the rates and activity, people feeling comfortable to list, etc., and not being quite sure what's happening. So, I mean, to me, the most telling of these is when we look at overall inventory comparatively, also the pricing. Again, we can't just say, a lot of people are like, oh, all these crazy price reductions. Well, where did we see the most price reductions? We saw the most price reductions in October, which is also when we saw the height of the mortgage rates. So when you are considering listing your home, or even maybe buying, when you're considering listing your home, if you know like prices are going or rates are going down, there's going to be more tolerance for a higher price, right? If rates are going down, people can afford a higher price. It's a lower monthly payment. When rates are going up, people are not tolerant of that. We saw that, we had more price reductions in October, which is the same month that rates hiked and we're at their peak for the year. So that's just something to consider. As we're seeing prices coming down, we noticed, like, for example, in February, prices went down, in April, prices went down. And in this month, for example, that was the lowest we saw price reductions. And then if we look at prices, like, let's go look at April. So this was the least amount of price reductions. What happened in April also is that there was a rate decrease. So lowest price reductions in Knox County. We look at April here, total listings were up, but not by a lot, like it wasn't a peak month. If we then look at what's happening with pending listings, April, they were also up. If we look at new listings, they were down, which I think is interesting. I think this could be lagged due to, like, here we had a rate hike in March, or we had a higher amount. April, median square foot, we don't care about this one. Look at this. April, more higher price, median listing price was higher. How many days were these things on market? Let's look. So April, what's interesting about this is the price per square foot was up in April, but overall listing price was down. That's weird. That makes zero sense Let's check it. List price per square foot for available homes in this market versus list price for homes for available homes not sold. Yeah, I know. We literally know that. April, we see median list price down. Where the house is smaller. Let's see. Slightly. I don't know. Isn't that weird? Y'all tell me what I'm missing. These should be aligned. The price per square foot should be aligned. It's high in April. It should be aligned also in April. So this is a little bit weird. Anyways, that being said, interestingly, it's not saying sold price, is it? Yeah, it's not sold price. Okay. Anyways, so April again, we saw price went down, median list price, but we see price per square foot goes up in April. And again, that's when there was a rate decrease. Active listings bottoms out in April, which would make sense for prices to be up as a result. So anyways, all of that to say, sorry for my rambling on comparing these graphs. All that to say is what we're finding is that when is a good time to sell? Certainly based on this, without a price reduction, not at the height of a rate increase. So that's one thing. From a buying perspective, what does it tell you? Well, maybe if you are buying at the height of a rate increase, you're going to have more negotiability, right? Because with this increase in overall price reductions, sellers are wanting to sell. I also think that we have been in a very active market. So when things aren't selling, sellers flip out because they're like, oh, we're supposed to sell in 7 days or blah, blah, blah. But actually, with rates increasing, things aren't going as quickly or won't go as quickly. Like if we look at what happened with days on market, how long stuff was taking to sell, this one, we see that rate hike, right? We can guess. So if it was 30 days in October, when were these houses listed? These houses were listed in September. These houses were listed in, see that? Well, the ones in December, if we just think about when is Christmas, the 25th. So we can assume that most houses aren't closing on the 25th, right? So that being said, these 51, they were being listed in October, right? So there is a lag here in what's happening from December to October, where these guys close in October, listed in September, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm making the point that we had this rate hike in October. It was highest, right? We had in October, we also had the highest price reductions. And then what we saw in December is that these houses were listed. They took longer to sell. They were listed in October in the midst of that height of the rate, right? So as we're looking at 2024, what's happening with rates? Some things that I would just want us to consider again is what's happening with rates as a seller. If you see rates increasing, careful with your pricing. Probably let's not think we're going to sell in 3 days. And then also you may have to be a little bit more negotiable. On the buy side, yes, maybe the prices are higher, maybe the rates are higher, but that means that there is going to be more negotiability when it comes to sellers because they're going to want to either they're going to drop their price, or I wish there was a stat here that talked about like how many seller concessions there were. So for example, like who was allowing like closing costs, who was doing rate buy downs, blah, 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 which there's no data on that here. I'm going to have to do a little digging and see where I can find that. But overall, looking into 2024, is it a good time to sell? Is it a good time to buy? We're still low in inventory, especially compared to the national average. So that is a great thing for sellers. If you're looking at rates, certainly if we know that rates are going to go down, you as a seller, you want less competition. So if we're knowing like, okay, rates are continually going down, the more rates go down, the more competition is going to go up. So just some things to think about as we're looking into the 2024 market. That being said, I know I had a little bit of rambling in there, comparing back and forth data, but I hope this was helpful. Would love to know your insights, things that you caught as you were comparing national versus Knox County. Again, if you want to see some Blount County data, if you want to see West Knox specifically, if you want to see Seymour specifically, of course, I obviously love to teach, love to talk, and would love to share it with you. So let me know in the comments. That being said, I'm Haley Jones. Subscribe for more information, to connect with me, and to get the latest and greatest news about real estate in the Knoxville area. I'm Haley Jones, and I'll see you next time.